Welcome to Basic Brewing Radio for Thursday, December 13th, 2007. I'm James Spencer. Here at Basic Brewing Radio, we're all about home brewing. Well, this week, Chris Colby of Brew Your Own magazine joins us to talk about the hop shortage. We talk about what's causing it, but more importantly, how will we be affected? What can we do? Well, if you're new to home brewing and would like to get into the hobby for the first time, check out our website, basicbrewing.com, where you can find archives of our audio and video podcasts and our DVDs to walk you through basic and more advanced brewing techniques. Once again, very quick thanks to everybody who's been picking up our low-tech lagering and decoction mashing DVD and our 2008 Brewer's Logbook. We're about halfway through the stock of logbooks. It'll be interesting to see if we have enough demand to have a second printing this year. Also, don't forget to let me know if you build your own low-tech lagering system, or LTLS, from the lagering DVD. Please let me know how it comes out, how it works for you. Hope it works as well as it works for me, and especially if you've made any improvements in the LTLS, let me know. I'll be curious to see how that evolves over time. I want to start the mailbag segment with a correction. Last week, in response to a question from Jake in Las Vegas, I said something like, steeping grains in the secondary? Why not? As long as they don't need to be converted in the mash, go right ahead. Well, Brian from Marquette, Michigan, and Rick Sellers from Pacific Brew News Radio, who's now beer editor for Draft Magazine, by the way, they both wrote and said that that'd probably be a bad idea. Brian and Rick are concerned about Lactobacillus, pediococcus, and other fun things on the grains that, they're concerned that they may spoil the beer in the secondary. And, I read those and I responded, oh, yeah. Yeah, you probably don't want to do that. So, if you want to add some color and flavor from steeping grains to your beer that's in the secondary, here's what I suppose you could do that's safer. You could steep your grains in some water to make a tea, just as if you were about to make a batch of beer. You don't have to use, as much water, obviously. Then you could boil that small tea for like 10 or 15 minutes to kill the bad stuff in there. Then you could add that grain tea more safely to your fermented beer to give it some color and flavor. So how about that? Try that. That's what I should have said. So thanks to Brian and Rick for helping me to keep honest there, keeping me honest. Also, thanks to Matt Kierkegaard, editor of Beer and Brewer Australia and New Zealand magazine, for giving us a mention in his publication. And welcome aboard to any new listeners who have joined us after seeing that. You can learn more about Beer and Brewer magazine at beerandbrewer.com for those of us who are listening south of the equator down there in Australia and New Zealand. Here's a note from Javier in Woodbridge, Virginia. Javier says, Jennifer, my girlfriend, and I would like to thank you for your Brew Your Own magazine 1-gallon extract recipe of an IPA. We brewed and followed the recipe to the letter about 5 weeks ago. We recently sampled the first bottle, and oh my God, it was so good. We couldn't believe how great it tasted. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Well, you're welcome, 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 Javier. I usually don't read notes like that on the show, but I wanted to let the small batch skeptics out there know that small batch brewing does work. Small batches can be fun, and they can also be useful and delicious. So maybe Javier, if he can find the Amarillo hops that are in that recipe, maybe he'll be encouraged to scale that recipe up into a big full batch. I got some feedback following last week's episode with homebrewer Benji Edwards on cask conditioning. John in Mountain View, California writes, your podcast on cask conditioning with Benji Edwards was great. Well, that's all the credit goes to Benji. He did a good job of explaining the process. John says, I've been brewing for a couple of years and have always bottle conditioned my beers and get good carbonation without any worry of explosion. John says, during primary fermentation, wait for the airlock to produce 2 bubbles every 90 seconds. At this point, you can bottle. I get consistent carbonation with a decent head of foam. There's always yeast at the bottom of the bottle, but if you don't mind this, give the technique a try. Well, thanks, John, Of course, there are some variables that come into play from setup to setup. You know, the type of airlock that you use, the temperature that you're fermenting at, the type of yeast, etc. All that can affect the rate of bubbles that you see coming out of the airlock. So it can be tricky, but it sounds like you found a system that works for you. But I'm more on the cautious side. I like waiting until I've reached terminal gravity and then adding priming sugar into the beer to control the amount of carbonation that I get. But you know, if your method works for you and you get good, consistent results, I appreciate you sharing the tip. But for those of you who are trying it for the first time, watching the bubbles and counting them and timing them, you might want to take a gravity reading while you're counting the bubbles to make sure that you're, you know, not on the track to making bottle bombs. Because like I say, everybody's setup is different. Mike from New York writes, I enjoyed the podcast on cask ale and wanted to chime in on using a corny as a cask. Mike says the 7-Barrel Brewery Brewer's Handbook, co-authored by Greg Noonan, who was on your water episode. Yeah, we talked to Greg about water, and he did a great job of talking about it. Anyway, the 7-Barrel Brewery Brewer's Handbook has a discussion on that topic. They basically give the same info as Benji, but they suggest switching the fittings so the beer out, black, is on the bottom. Based on all this great info, if you want to go to the extra mile for dispensing, you can do the following to add a faucet directly to your corny. Mike says you can purchase a ball lock quick disconnect faucet assembly from an online brew shop, or if you have the pieces, put your own together. You'll need the following: a beverage out with a flared fitting, a quick disconnect faucet adapter, and a faucet. There you go. Thanks for the tip, Mike. And you don't have to, you know, if your local brew shop has that stuff, you can buy it from them. You don't have to go online. Support your local brew shop. Another Mike from this one from South Bend, Indiana writes, hey, I just watched your video on skunking beers. That's a recent Basic Brewing video episode on skunking beers, one of my favorites. Mike says, I know I'm a little behind, but I have some input you might find useful. My friends bought some Bud Light and left it outside in the snow for 2 weeks. Anyway, we opened some to try it, and sure enough, it was slightly skunked. It actually tasted a little better than normal. like a Corona meets Bud. There you go. Thanks, Mike. I guess a little off flavor is better than no flavor at all. Speaking of the video podcast, Steve and I shot 2 episodes yesterday in his kitchen. We made a wassail and a fruitcake using a little barley wine that I brewed. Very, very tasty show. Look for that later this week and later this month on basicbrewingvideo.com. One more letter. Lars from Boston writes, on one of your recent shows, you discussed ways to help friends break into homebrew. I have 2 suggestions. Number 1, offer small portions. Use a shot glass or a 6-ounce glass, but only pour 2 ounces, and make sure to say so when offering the beer. Most people would try it. And number 2, a blind test is fun. Find the homebrew. Dark beers scare most people, but if they cannot see the porter, they might actually learn that they like it. Again, use small servings so you don't end up with a socially uncomfortable moment if your friends don't like your brew and feel forced to, quote-unquote, enjoy a whole pint of it. That's a very good tip. Lars says, I keg my beers, so it's easy to serve a 1 to 2 ounce taste. If you bottle and serve a 2-ounce taste for a friend and they don't like it, you just have to find a way to get rid of the remaining 10 ounces. Lars says. I could figure out how to get rid of, spare homebrew. Thanks, Lars. There's not much sadder than seeing, most of a bottle or glass of wasted homebrew, that's left behind from someone who doesn't appreciate it. Excellent suggestions, Lars. Okay, there you go. You have heard there's a hop shortage. If you've been to the homebrew store, you've experienced it firsthand. Old standbys, like even Cascades, are even disappearing from the coolers. How did we get here? And what do we do? Well, Chris Colby of Brew Your Own magazine joins us with some insight. Well, Chris Colby, welcome to Basic Brewing Radio.
Good morning, James.
We're trying a new experiment today. Since you're on so much, one of our listeners suggested that we get you on Skype, and here we are.
And here I am on Skype.
And you sound a lot better.
Plus, it's fun to say Skype.
But let's get to the point. I understand. Someone told me the other day that there's a hop shortage. Is this true?
Yeah, this is true. The availability of hops this year fell several hundred metric tons below the desire for them, and there are breweries right now who are going without hops.
And it's especially painful for us because we're kind of the last man on the rung, or the low rung on the use your own analogy, but we're the last one to get hops, right?
Yeah, generally, hop growers, they contact, or their first desire to sell things is just to the huge, multinational breweries, like SAB Miller and Heineken and all that, and the craft brewers who to us seem gigantic, like a lot of the breweries, like especially Sam Adams, but even things like Stone Brewery or whatever, which seem like huge breweries to us, are a drop in the bucket worldwide. They're 3% of the U.S. market, and when you then figure out what percent of the world market they are, they're tiny, and but they buy tons of hops compared to us, and so about the time that they've gotten their share, what comes to us is sort of the leftover, which in years when there's, as there has been in the past, when there's been a surplus, it's not been a problem. But this year, when hops are in short supply, it is going to be a problem.
So this was kind of a perfect storm. What created this mess?
Yeah, that's how, when I talked to Ralph Olson for the upcoming article in BYO, he called it a perfect storm. What happened was basically, for many, many years, there was a surplus of hop product on the market. Every year, about 50% of the hops that are grown get turned into hop extract, essentially liquid alpha acids. And there were some good years in the 90s where both, having more acres than were needed and bumper crops combined to produce a lot of extract, that this all got put on the market and made a surplus. And so every year, people still continued to grow hops, but, every year they would, their harvest would, just figuratively be thrown on the pile. So hop prices were low because a lot of the, extract and also, pellets and stuff were warehoused, and people were selling them at below cost, just, so they didn't have to pay for the warehouse anymore. And brewers got used to cheap hops, and growers, got used to not getting much for their crop, so they started, growing other things, converting their hop acreage over to other crops. They, especially over in Europe, a lot of them just got out, sold their land to developers. And so what happened was this year, after many, many years of having this surplus sort of keeping prices down and artificially depressing the market, the surplus dried up. And when people sort of, got up, rubbed their eyes and looked around, they noticed that the amount of hop acreage is below the level to meet demand. And and then in addition, it's been a crappy year for growing hops. The U.S. crop is probably not too bad, but Europe is just a disaster. Bad crop. England had a lot of flooding this year. Germany, I'm not sure exactly what the problem was. It might have been wet conditions leading to a lot of powdery mildew or something, but they had a bad year. Slovenia had a really bad year. They had they had their hop growing region was hit with a hailstorm. You can actually see it on YouTube, and they show a picture of the fields. The day, what was supposed to be the day of harvest, and all the hops are just basically gone because the hail just took them off the trellises. And I mean that individual, sort of accident is only part of the whole story. But basically most places had, there's a few places that at best had like an average year. A lot of other places around the U.S. or around the world, had a growing season such that they were 30 to 40% below, their target of how much they were going to grow, and then it's compounded with, the fact that there's not enough acreage to begin with because we've been working on surplus for years, and there's your perfect storm.
So how long is this going to last? Are we in for it for just this year, or how long are we going to have to deal with this situation?
This is going to last at least a couple years. One thing about growing hops is that you plant them from rhizomes, as you know, because you grow hops, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So in the first year, basically, you don't get any cones. It just grows up a big vine. In the U.S., in a lot of the places where they grow hops, in the second year, you get enough cones to make harvesting it worthwhile. But in Europe and some other places, just due to growing conditions, generally they don't yield enough cones to, you could go out and harvest them, but it would cost you more to harvest them than it would to, than you'd recoup from selling the cones. So you got to plant the hops, and you need 2 to 3 years to, until you have a crop. Additionally, if you haven't previously been a hop farmer, you have to go trellis your fields. You have to buy the hop poles, and you have to buy the wire, and you have to, get someone who knows how to string it up and build that. And much more importantly, you need to build the hop, the hop harvesting machines, which are big, warehouse-sized things that the tractors bring the hop vines into, and they get processed. And you have to build the oasts, the ovens, which are, again, big warehouse-sized things. So, I mean, really, the only practical way that hop acreage is going to get added is to, farms that previously had the capacity. And so that's going to take a while. And, also the farmers have been used to low hop prices for so long. It's going to take, it's going to take a little while before they're convinced that, I guess, I should be planting hops again.
And then
I think the prices have gone from $3 to $26 a pound. So I think that should be more than enough to give them the picture. But
and of course, too many farmers will get into it again, and we'll have a surplus, and that'll drive the prices down, and then they'll get out, and we'll have a problem again.
Yeah, I was talking to this is his name, Sean McCree from Brewer Supply, and he said that if you look historically at the hop prices, they've been kind of cyclical. And I mean, he didn't say that was the exact cause, but it's likely. I mean, that happens in markets of everything. The price gets good for something, everyone in the world plants it. Then the price goes down, and everyone in the world bails out, and there's no planning to it. There's no, like, if we had this many people grow it, the prices would be perfect.
So that's what caused it. What's the effect? I mean, I couldn't believe it the other day. I went down to my local homebrew shop, and they didn't have Cascade. I never thought I'd see the day. What are the hops that are being affected the most? Yeah,
well, the effect is that there are apparently on the commercial side, if I can start there are breweries right now, big international breweries that are hundreds of tons short of the hop they need. A lot of them buy extract. And, also craft brewers, ones that didn't have contracts with hop growers. Some breweries and some hop dealers, have contracts with brewers or with growers. I'm sorry, but the ones without are sort of scrambling around looking for hops. In my article, I talked to some people, like I talked to Vinny Chilurzo of Russian River, and he said he was fine. And I also emailed Sam Calagione from Dogfish, and they, both of them said, "Oh, we have contracts, so we're going to get the hops we need." But I also talked to some other people, including I've got a second cousin who brews in a brew pub. He actually makes 10 gallons of beer at a time. It's like a homebrew brew pub almost. It's cool. And he's having to readjust all his recipes because he can't get Cascade. He can't get any of his signature hops. And for homebrewers, what it's going to mean is, I really think that the hops that are available to us, it's hard to predict right now. There are going to be certain sort of global things, but I think homebrew shops are going to have a very sort of individualistic selection of hops, and I think that's going to change over the year. I think there'll be, at first it'll be whatever they, in the beginning of the year it'll be whatever they got, and that'll be highly dependent on when they found out about the crisis, how often their hop buyer got on the phone and just looked around, because I've heard from my local shop that they just spend, they make a couple calls a week to all their different, hop suppliers, and every once in a while something pops up and they grabbed it. Like they just got some Styrian Goldings, which is one of the hops that are just going to be, pretty much unavailable. And, I think later on in the year, when the hype around the crisis dies down, I think some people are going to release some stash they had. I think some of the homebrew shops are probably keeping a little bit of some hop varieties in reserve. And I think some homebrewers and some commercial brewers who maybe are hoarding right now, who, got panicked and bought a ton, so there'll be like a black market for hops. And then at the end of the year, I think it's going to get pretty lean pickings. We'll have hops. The downside of being a home brewer is that we're at the end of the chain, but the upside is that we don't need that much hops to get by. So there'll be hops on the shelves, but we just won't know which ones they are. Like Cascades is going to be, unless your homebrew shop makes a nice score somewhere, you're probably not likely to get Cascades. Forget all the English hops, Kent Goldings, Fuggles. You're not going to find. You might be able to find U.S. grown versions of them. All the German hops, Hallertau, Tettnang. Very likely you won't be able to find those. Sots. Even if you can find Sots, Czech grown Sots. This year, the average alpha acid of those, this is due to the weather, came in at around 1%. So even if you could find them, it's not going to do you that much good. Unless you just have so much money that you want to. I guess as a home brewer, it wouldn't be that big of a problem. But there's a brewery around here called Live Oak that their signature for years has been a Pilsner that's the 100% sauce. And, they would have to quadruple the amount of hops they put into it, even if they could find them. So,
wow,
a lot of breweries that have, if you had the combination of having a beer with a signature hop and no hop contracts, you're going to have to do some reformulating this year.
So let's talk on the homebrew level of strategies of how are we going to cope. I guess the first strategy would be to do like your homebrew shop is doing, is look around and find the hops that you want and stock up. Yeah,
that's a good thing to do. When I heard about this, I sort of went and looked around, and at the time, Putterbaugh Farms still had some hops available, and I bought a couple pounds of Cascade and a couple pounds of Amarillo for $26 a pound.
Wow!
But I figured I used those hops and liked those hops enough that for the next 2 years I was willing to do that.
And we won't broadcast what your address is.
Yeah.
You might find somebody sneaking around your hop fridge.
Yeah. I'll have them stored in a secret offsite facility. And take a look around. There's even now, you can, if you look on the web, you see most places have, most of their hops are sold out, but the different varieties that each have varies because, some hops are just, I guess, more popular in some regions of the country. Some are just, I'm sure the stores bought different amounts. And so there's a very sort of individualistic selection at most stores. I mean, there's some common threads like you're going to be hard pressed to find Cascades. I mean, I don't think it's absolutely impossible right now, but you're going to be looking around.
So what's the proper way to store your hops over a long term?
Yeah, if you have a freezer, store them there, and especially hopefully you'll have a freezer without the frost-free mechanism. Frost-free freezers, they freeze the food and then they go through cycles where they warm up to just above freezing, so that any ice in the freezer melts and then they drop below for a while, and they keep doing that. And that's great if you don't want to clean your freezer out, but it's bad for storage properties. If you're storing hops, you want to keep them frozen. And one way you can do this, even if you do have a frost-free freezer, if you have a regular freezer without frost-free, just put the hops in there and you're good. But if you have a non-frost-free freezer, if you have a frost-free freezer, take either like a small picnic cooler, like they have some that are sized to hold just like a sandwich and a soda and an apple or something like that. Or you can also do it just with Ziploc bags. But take your hops, pack them in crushed ice and stick them inside your freezer. The idea was that your freezer will go through the frost-free cycles, but your hops will be sitting on ice inside the freezer, and they won't, they'll be buffered from the heat change, and they will stay at freezing temperatures.
And I've got one of those seal-a-meal things that sucks the air out of the bag and seals it. So there's another variable that you can take care of that way.
Yeah, if you open up your hop bag and then you don't use all of it, definitely a seal-a-meal thing would work very good.
Now people are going to have to learn to substitute other hops for their favorite hops and start exploring other recipes and other styles of beer that they aren't used to brewing, right?
A lot of hops have sort of a classic substitution for them. Like if you ran out of Cascades, a lot of people know, well, try Centennial or Amarillo. The downside of this, of course, is that a lot of the hops that are substitution hops, like if you say, well, you're out of Cascade, I guess I'll go with Centennial. Well, Centennial's, not very prevalent either. And, a lot of the obvious substitutions are going to be gone soon. But there are some of the new hops that should be fairly well available that, have a good, are a good sort of substitute for existing hops. For example, Sterling, that's a variety of hop that is supposedly a good Sots substitute, and that one's going to be available. Vanguard, which is supposedly a good Hallertau sub, that's going to be available. And Glacier, which is supposedly a good Willamette substitute. When I talked to all the people in the article, I talked to a ton of people. The three hops that sort of in every, that everybody mentioned that they are going to be able to get some, Glacier, Vanguard, and Sterling came out every time. Yeah, so we've got hops that are, substituting for some of these classic varieties, like Sterling substituting for Czech Sots, and, Czech hops are going to be hard to come by. We've got Vanguard substituting for German Hallertau, and those are going to be hard to come by. Some other ones that might be worth looking into are Santiam. That's another new hop. That's supposedly a good Tettnang clone. And of course, everyone, or not everyone, but a large amount of homebrewers, I think, are going to be looking for that American, citrusy C hop, feel, and they're gonna not find Cascades, Centennial and Amarillo, whatever amount of that gets on the market is going to be, gone pretty quickly, because that is the obvious substitution. And I think there people are going to look to the new hop called, or a relatively new variety called Autanum. This is an American it's well, you can think of it as a C hop, even though it starts with an A. But yeah, it's if you've ever had Stone IPA, that's at least reputedly the main hop there, and it's a good. I mean, it's a good hop, and and again, people will, I think, maybe try it as a Cascade substitute at first, but they may also come to just like it as a hop, and if it doesn't succeed 100% in their beer where they wanted it for Cascade, they might think, well, yeah, but I have another beer, or I can change this to be something more that I like. So yeah, I mean, this year, Sterling, Vanguard, and Glacier, also Autanum and Santiam, and Liberty. It's an older variety, an old Hallertau sub, which we might see quite a bit of. And there's some other oddball hops that might show up, but those are going to be some of the main, I think. I mean, the one thing about the whole hop crisis right now is that how it unfolds, nobody really knows. We can make some educated guesses, and if like I talked to a bunch of people, and they all said we were able to get Sterling, Glacier, and Vanguard, and and usually many other hops, but those didn't line up with other people, and they usually said, no, we can't get Cascade, we can't get anything from Europe. But as the year plays out, we'll see how it goes, but it'll be interesting.
So this may get some brewers to kind of broaden their horizons and try some new recipes that they haven't tried before.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's going to be, if you're the kind of brewer that starts with the BJCP guidelines, it's going to be a tough couple years because there just aren't classic beer styles that, are brewed with Vanguard, Sterling, Glacier, Santiam. Those are hop varieties, by the way. In case, they're just, there aren't. If you're wanting to brew a real traditional English ale, with, Fuggles or Kent Goldings or, any of the rest of them, you're just going to be pretty much SOL. I mean, there's, English breweries for years, commercial English breweries have been using a variety of hops now. So, I guess you can brew, in one sense, an authentic English ale with Cascades, if you could find them, which you can't. But, yeah, you could, if you're used to brewing a recipe with some of the classic, aroma hops, you're just not going to be able to, and therefore you're either going to have to decide, am I going to try to brew the same recipe and find a hop that's similar, or am I just going to experiment and try to brew a beer that, I'm just going to take how the hop smells into consideration, and, after the first time you brew with it, how it tastes, and just say, okay, I'm going to formulate a beer recipe that, where the malt, and your yeast choice and all your process details, if they, work with that new hop.
And another, that this could be an excuse for brewing in small batches, brewing maybe like a gallon or two at a time to get get a feel of what the hop characteristics of these unfamiliar hops are before you expand that recipe into a full batch.
Yeah, you could if you wanted to. Brew a test batch, a small batch, 1 gallon or a couple gallons before you scaled up. On the other hand, I would say that although different hop varieties have different characters, they're all still hops. And, if you smelled a hop variety and you thought, hey, this smells pretty good, and, you had a style of beer that you thought it would work pretty well in, depending on the time available and like how exacting you want to be, I'd probably just jump right in and try it at 5 gallons, but you could try it at a smaller one. You could, especially if you buy several of the newer hop varieties and want to try them out. Small batch is one option. And certainly if you've got, if you have some hops in reserve, some of your favorite still in your freezer, and you want to brew like a big double IPA or something, you might be thinking, well, geez, 5 gallons of that is going to, kill my hop stash. You might want to consider brewing a 3-gallon batch of it, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's a possibility. Varying your batch size to how much hops you have on hand, especially the varieties that you aren't going to see for a while. That's a very good possibility.
Yeah, late hopping with a whole bunch of hops is all of a sudden sounding wasteful, and
Yeah, I don't think a lot of people are going to be doing a lot of hop bursting, as they call it right now. You're most likely going to want to be getting better utilization out of your hops. But then again, on a homebrew scale, it's what you want to do, and even if the price has gone up considerably, it's only a couple bucks for hops in a batch of beer, so you can still brew a wasteful batch, and it's not going to bankrupt most homebrewers.
So this could be a good thing. It could be that we come up with new styles of beers, and formerly obscure hop varieties could come into the forefront as something that we begin to rely on.
Yeah, I think people are really going to. I mean, some people, of course, are going to. They got into homebrewing. They probably immediately got into sort of the brewing to style mindset that's the only thing you can do, and they're probably going to try to just cram the new hops into the old styles. But I think a lot of homebrewers are going to start thinking more like a chef or like a cook, and just start evaluating the aromas and flavors and bittering properties of the new hops, and just try to come up with a house brew, a house ale that that takes into consideration the properties of these new hop varieties that we will be able to get.
And I'm assuming that Brew Your Own magazine is going to be at the forefront of those efforts.
Well, I hope so. I actually went to my local shop, which has a bunch of the newer varieties, and went online to find the ones that they didn't have. Got a whole bunch of the newer hops that are supposed to be more available, and I'm hoping to brew some test batches. I'm gonna go through and for the first round just smell the hops, because that should give you some information on their aroma properties. Read up on them, put them into a recipe that should should both be a good recipe and be a good sort of platform to show people what these hops look like. And hopefully I'll get that all done by before Christmas.
No pressure.
Yeah, no pressure.
Another tactic that you can use to face this hop shortage is to grow your own hops. And I've got Cascade in the ground. I put those in last year, and I had good results from my first year with Cascade. I got like 3 ounces short of 2 pounds of wet hops off of my Cascade in the first year, and it did the same this year. It was just great. Now, on the other hand, I planted Hallertauer and Kent Goldings, and I think they had like 6 hop cones between them. So it may depend on where you live in the country and what variety of hops that you get, but potentially you can get some pretty good yields just from your own little hop field.
Yeah, you sure can. And also, you've incidentally highlighted another sort of aspect of the hop crisis that we haven't talked about. One thing I talk about in my article is there's the hop crisis in which we don't, there's fewer hops, but there's the crisis within the crisis, and that's that a lot of the aroma hops that we really value, like you mentioned Hallertau and Kent Goldings, yield a lot less per acre than a lot of the newer high alpha versions. And also a lot of the when the big multinational breweries contract with hop dealers or with growers directly, they're buying just alpha acids. Heineken doesn't care what hop varieties are grown. They go into its extract. They just want extract. So with a lot of the varieties of aroma hops that we prize, they've got both low alpha acids and low yield. So you can grow something like Columbus and get 4 times as much hops at 4 times as much alpha, for 16. I'm making these numbers up, but but I'm close, I think. So you got 16 times as much alpha per acre, And what are farmers going to do? They're not idiots. They're going to grow high alpha hops, and that's been the trend. They've been ripping out acreage of the low alpha hops. Either when we're scaling down their hop farm totally, they've been taking out alphas first, or even if they're keeping their even if they were keeping their hop acreage the same, they were replanting low alpha, the aroma hops with new higher alpha stuff. And even next year, when there's supposedly like 5,000 acres went in the ground this year of new hops, and another 15,000 projected for next year. Although that's anybody's guess really. It's probably all going to be high alpha, and some of it, the existing acreage is going to be converted from some of those varieties to what they call CZT, Columbus Zeus Tomahawk, high alpha varieties, or other high alpha varieties. So the the crisis within the crisis is that even when the first crisis is over and hops are plentiful, some of the aroma hops that we're used to and that we like in our classics, may still be in short supply. Some of them, in fact, may never reappear. So that's the it gets worse part of the of the situation. There's nothing's ever so bad that it can't get worse.
Well, you're just nothing but good news and sunshine. Another possibility, if you can't find the hops that you want, is to maybe try a gruit or mead or a cider.
That's a possibility, but I mean, just personally, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to make gruit. I'm not going to make cider. I'm not going to make mead. It's not. Well, I've made mead before. Maybe I'll make mead. But as a substitute for beer, I'm not going to do any of that. I'm either going to make beer with hops, or I'm not going to make it. But that's just me.
Well, to look on the bright side, I think that I'm kind of looking forward to playing with new hops and kind of figuring out new things to do, because I kind of get stuck in a rut sometimes. So I'm looking forward to seeing what new things I can find out and seeing what others can find out as well.
Yeah, I think that's going to be fun. I think there's going to be, I think one thing people are right now probably thinking like, oh, new hops, I like the old ones. But I think when people, get a hold of them, I mean, they're grown, they've gone from being tested to being grown at a certain, amount of acreage for a reason. And that reason is that they have good brewing properties. And, so I think people are going to, when they, once they get over the fact that some of their favorite varieties aren't available, they're going to look at some of these newer varieties, try it. They're going to try it in a style and suddenly go, hey, that's pretty good, and then, hopefully through homebrew clubs and through, homebrew forums and, podcasts perhaps, people will, say, hey, I used this hop in, this kind of beer and it turned out really good. And, I think we'll pretty quickly, hit a stride where people are finding good, good combinations of malt, hops, and yeast. I'm going to brew beers the way I've been doing it. They'll be hoppy, even if it's a new kind of hop. When I burn through my stash, and I think a lot of homebrewers are going to be that way. I mean, right now there's a lot of panic in homebrewing. If you read the forums, there are people talking about, well, maybe we'll be, bittering our beers with cow bile. And, it's like, no, we're not going to be bittering our beers with cow bile. And there's, a lot of people are saying, well, it'll be the year of the gruit. And no, it's not going to be the year of the gruit. It's going to be the year of, Glacier, Sterling, and Vanguard hops is what it's going to be. And you're just going to have to figure out how to brew with those, pretty much.
So do you know of a good supply for cow bile?
Other than cows, I don't know. There's a reason why, basically 100% of beers brewed have hops in them as opposed to, other things. And, even Froak, the heather ale, which is really very good, has hops in it. It's just accentuated with heather tips. Yeah, but there's, people, we're gonna find out through the year that hops are available. It's not going to come down to cow bile. and we're going to find out. I think a lot of people are going to find out that they like some of these new varieties. We're certainly going to be happy when the old varieties reappear, and don't cost $26 a pound. But I think in the meantime, people are really going to, they're going to try these, new varieties, and they're going to like them.
So to kind of sum up, it's going to be a little bit difficult in the next months and maybe years, but it's not going to be the end of homebrewing as we know it.
When I talked to Charles Culp from Austin Homebrew, I was asking all the homebrew shops, how do you think this is going to affect homebrewing? Different people have said, well, if people can't get Styrian Goldings or whatever, they're just not going to brew. And other people have said, well, with rising, prices of craft beer, more people are going to be attracted to homebrewing. And his attitude was more like he didn't think it was going to be that big of a draw. People will just pay the extra couple bucks for commercial craft beer if that's their option. And also, he thought that, he said homebrewing is a lifestyle. It's like, it's something we do. We like brewing beers. We like sharing these beers with our buddies in our homebrew shop. And, he didn't think it was going to be that big of a deal. He didn't think people were going to give up homebrewing just because Styrian Goldings was available.
Well, once again, Chris, we appreciate your time.
Okay, thanks, James.
Well, thanks again to Chris Colby of Brew Your Own magazine. You can read his article about the hop shortage in the upcoming issue of Brew Your Own. You can get a free issue of BYO by clicking on the Brew Your Own banner on basicbrewing.com. And if you subscribe after reading that issue, you'll be helping to support this podcast. We appreciate everybody who's done that so far. If you have brewing... and also if you have a good source for cow bile... Oh, boy. If you have brewing questions, show suggestions, or just want to say hey, write to james@basicbrewing.com, or just fill out the contact form on basicbrewing.com, and please don't forget to tell us where you're from. The 2008 Brewers Logbooks are here. Check them out on our site, and also check out our new low-tech lagering and decoction mashing DVD, where you can see Steve do a single-step decoction mash, and you can follow me through a lager fermentation in the middle of summer, where I don't even use a dedicated chest freezer. But if you do have a chest freezer, the tips will work for you as well. There are also our original DVDs still out there. In Basic Brewing, Introduction to Extract Home Brewing, we walk you through the extract brewing process, step by step from boiling to bottling. And in Basic Brewing, Stepping into All Grain, we take you through the all grain process from milling your grain to collecting your wort. We've got new combo deals to save you a few bucks if you want to buy more than one DVD at a time. And, of course, you can see a listing of the fine folks across the country who sell our DVDs on basicbrewing.com. And if there isn't a vendor in your area, you can order it online. And I will put it, if you order before noon on Central Time, I usually put them in the mail that day. And if not, the next day. So, still time for Christmas. It's getting short, though. And we've got our hats and shirts as well. And thanks to everybody who's continued to click on our Amazon.com link. We appreciate the support. Lots of activity there with the Christmas season. Our featured products this week that were purchased through the link are 14-karat white gold Journey Curve Pendant. Very nice. And the Art of Sensual Massage book and DVD set. So pair those two gifts together, and that is quite a well-stuffed stocking, if you get my drift. Oh, boy. Thanks again, everybody. And remember, I can't tell who bought what, so no worries there. Just click on the Amazon.com logo on our site. Next time you feel like Amazon shopping, we appreciate your support. That's all. Till next week. Till then, thanks for listening. I'm James Spencer. Production help for Basic Brewing Radio and our website is provided by Kelly Dodson, her buddy in Austin, who also did our logo. Basic Brewing Radio is a production of Active Voicing. We'll talk to you next time, everybody. So long.